Hello and welcome to the show. This is Do All the Things, and on today's episode, working once again on my general gaming rig. It's finally happened. The plan that I had all along before I got distracted. We're putting in a 5800 X3D. So if you've been following the comedy, you might be aware that I built myself a gaming rig for my living room, which I'm only running off an old plasma TV and I'm using a PlayStation controller. But it's evolved. It started off, it was just going to be this cheap throw together out of spare parts, but then my Vega 64 wasn't working in it, so I got an ARC and I bought a used 3700X, but then I upgraded my main system, which freed up my 3950X and my 32 gigs of RAM and my X570 Hero board. So that's what's in it now. And then after all that, I just went online and I bought a new processor, 5700G. But now that 5700G is gone, and as was the initial plan, I believed that after I upgraded my main system, I was going to flip some of my excess parts and buy a 5800 X3D. That's what I've done now. So I guess I should explain the situation with the 5700G. I bought it somewhat on impulse because I found it was cheap, kinda, at least for a 8-core 16-thread 5000 series processor. The 5800X and the 5700X, not much more expensive. They could all be had affordably. Now, to be fair, cheap is relative, because if we look, the 5700X is even cheaper than this one. But the 5700X is going to support PCI Express 4.0 and is going to have more cache, whereas the 5700G has less cache and only PCI Express 3.0. For a little bit more, we get the 5800X. It's only when we get to the X3D that the price jumps up. That said, you might be wondering, well, why, if the 5700G was so good, why'd you go get this? I bought it out of an experiment. I wanted to see what I could do with an iGPU. If I could use that to offload certain tasks while I'm gaming. Now, in the case of live streaming, if you're using, say, I had the Intel card in there at one point, then yes, in OBS, you can set hardware encoding to be AMD and it will go to that card, or the iGPU. If you have an AMD video card and the AMD iGPU, then it doesn't work because you only have one AMD encoder on that list and it's going to default to the main card. Also, anything that you're doing on the iGPU, for example, I don't know if it applied to a web browser, I didn't test it, but say you had a second monitor plugged into the iGPU. There was a Linus video that kind of proved that you will get a marginal fraction of error difference in performance if you have more monitors hooked up, and in streaming and gaming, sometimes you have multiple monitors hooked up. Maybe you offload one of those monitors to the iGPU, but then OBS might have a hard time capturing what's going on those other monitors, say if you want to capture web browser or something. Now, I did do an experiment where I took a second application that's 3D, that uses the 3D card. Maybe in your streaming, you have some sort of special effect that's part of your avatar, that's part of your presentation, that uses 3D rendering resources. And you do not want to steal those resources from the game. You want to use the second GPU. Can you do that? That was the question that I wanted to answer. And the answer is no, you can't. Because even though you can kind of work around Windows to get that second GPU to work, as an example, I would have my main monitor plugged into the iGPU. I would load up said application on main monitor and run it, and provided the graphics settings attached to that application were correct, that application would start rendering on the iGPU. Then you activate your gaming monitor. You have to turn it on after, and in some cases, depending on how it interfaces, this is what happened with my gaming TV. As soon as you turn it on, it detects that monitor, it adds that monitor, and then I have that monitor set to the main monitor. So it's kind of cool. Whenever I turn off on my TV, Windows automatically detects it and reassigns the main monitor from this one to the TV. And then when you run the game, it starts on the main monitor and it's rendering on the main GPU. So you will have your secondary application rendering on the iGPU. the main application rendering on the main GPU, but you cannot put them together because OBS will only capture whatever's happening on the video card that it's running off of. So if you started up OBS when that was the main monitor, it can't see the game. Or if you start up OBS after the main monitor switches over, it can't see the application. Everything that OBS captures seems to need to be consolidated on the same GPU solution. Now, if there's ways to get around this, I don't know, but this is as far as I took it. The iGPU is useless for me for the aspect of trying to render other applications in the background. And then, well, obviously, when it was all said and done, I wanted to keep my X570 Hero. It's one of the best AM4 boards. Might as well chuck it in my gaming rig and, boom. But there's one detail about it that I forgot. I never noticed it until it came up. Unlike all the other AM4 boards I have, this one doesn't have video outputs. This board is strictly an enthusiast discrete video card board. It does not have an HDMI or a display port on it. So the iGPU didn't even work on that board. The processor itself worked, but there was no way to plug a video into it. And so the board didn't even have the option in BIOS to enable the iGPU. So it wouldn't even show up in Windows. You couldn't even use it for secondary applications like rendering. So it's like, okay, I got this processor I bought and I bought it as a novelty to test it. And in the end, it's not even properly compatible with the board that I have. Well then, okay, whatever. I happily gamed on it because it was still a 5000 series 8-core 16 threads. I played Far Cry 6 on it, and that ran frickin' on rails. Played Starfield on it. Starfield ran fine. Starfield's not the best optimized, and I keep refusing to update my video drivers because I was preparing for this in particular benchmark. Once I'm done here today, I can finally update my video drivers, but that had nothing to do with the CPU. CPU is running Starfield just fine. Now, if I hadn't have had the opportunity, I would have been perfectly happy to keep that processor, but I had the opportunity because a buddy came over one day and I was showing him my gaming, and then he's like, you know what? I was thinking of getting into PC gaming. Yeah, Steam, games on sale. Oh, wow, look at that. And I was also thinking about the Xbox Live there. He has a PS5. And the funny thing is, I've known this guy for years. I didn't realize how into gaming he was. He was a buddy who always comes over, talks about amps and guitars. So he's talking about buying a gaming PC, but not wanting to spend that much money because he's not sure how interested he's going to be in it in the long run. Then I'm like, well, hey, buddy, don't I just have an opportunity for you? I just upgraded a bunch of my systems. I have a ton of spare parts now. I could build you a gaming rig. So he got the X470 board, which is PCI Express 3.0, but it has video outputs and it matched perfectly with the 5700G. A 3.0 processor, a 3.0 board, iGPU, video outputs, and it's also a high-grade gaming board. And if you've been following the company, you know that I saw zero difference in gaming performance between that and the higher-end X570. Right, so I went into the other room, kitchen, broke the seal on this, and I'm noticing this thing's light as frig, bud. When I got the box, it was like, what, is there even something in here? It felt like there's nothing in here. This is different packaging than any other AMD I've ever gotten. It's like they bothered with all this box, and they used to have like a foam bit in here. Like here. This is the more premium Ryzen 9 packaging. It actually has some heft to it, even though it's just okay, little bit less than this. Update the BIOS. Yeah, I already updated the BIOS before starting this video. This feels heavy. 5000 series 7 X3D. All right, well, I guess we just gotta go. Freaking get that in there, buds. Okay, so at this point, I've switched out the CPU on this system so many times. It's pretty much, I got it down to an art now. I got the power turned off, still plugged in for grounding. I gotta pull this stick of RAM. Oh yeah, 32 gigs. Kind of against my philosophy to put 32 gigs in a gaming rig. But that's because people, they buy 32 gigs of crap RAM, like 3200 CL16 or 3600 CL18. That lets us pull the fan out, and being able to pull the fan lets us unscrew the heatsink. This trusty old Cooler Master Hyper 212. It has, it's been cooling the 3950X just fine. So it should be able to handle cooling the more efficient 5800X3D, right? I do have a plan to water cool this system. because I believe I'm gonna be able to fit at least a 120 mil rad in here. And I know from experience, a good 120 mil open loop rad with push-pull fan configuration can cool one CPU just fine, especially a 105 watt TDP rated CPU. Like I've had that configuration back in the day on much, like the 140 watt Phenom 2X940, and that's actually going to burn that wattage. It's not like these ones. They're these modern CPUs gaming, you know, they could peak out to their TDP, but they're not going to average there. While gaming, you're probably going to get an average of 60 to 90 watts max, you know? I guess it depends on the game. I try to clean the thermal schmoo off this as best I can before I remove it from the socket. All right, X3D. We're gonna schmoo that goo. We're gonna use the same stuff we were using the last couple of times, the Noctua. And we got our cooler master lined up and invest in squishing that cat. You know what? You wouldn't be able to quad out the RAM with this cooler. That fan's in the way. All right, this should work now. What the hell? There's some plane out there fragging around. Fragging around. It's fragging. Now I have it on good authority. I said, now I have it on good authority. It's gonna pop up the BIOS on this particular monitor here. So that's the monitor we're gonna use. Such an empty box. Yeah, there it is. We've detected a new processor which will change the data structure of the storage space for the firmware TPM. If you do not apply TPM function, please press Y to continue. Otherwise, please follow the instructions before. Always just press yes and it works. Press yes and it works, bot. It's that simple. Press yes and it works. But it's gonna derp out all my freaking BIOS settings. I think she's RAM tracing. She keeps like phasing in and out of existence over there. There we go. New CPU installed. Press F1. F1 is pressed, huh? Ah, there it is. 5800X3D. 3400 is the base. Go here and enable the freaking RAM profile, bud. There we go. 4G decoding, resize bar. Such an important feature and it's disabled by default. Like, come on, buds. Fix your BIOS. I think everything else here is fine, other than we go to boot, make sure CSM is turned off, exit save changes. System should boot off right where it left off. Boot off, not boot up. It's gonna boot off. Well, we don't want it to boot off. We want it to boot on. But you can calm down. Yeah, there she goes. There she goes again. Nice. We're up. So we're busting out the old spreadsheet here and we're just adding a line to this X570 compare. Nothing's changed since this thing. At least I don't believe it has. I haven't updated any drivers. Just gotta jump into some benchmarks to see how these numbers compare to these existing processors. Okay, so what do we have here? 120s of the feet per second, 150s, 160s of the feet per second. How much is this a CPU? Now, mind you, we were getting high numbers of this first test to begin with, so it's like, wow, doesn't even friggin' matter, bud. Okay, here we go. Here's the test that freaking knocked it in the butt. Oh, we're still getting 90s and 100s in here. 80s, 90s. Were we getting those before? I don't remember. And then here's going to be your CPU test. As usual, it starts dropping lower and lower, 50s, 30s. It dropped rapidly as more physics appear on the screen. Stayed in the 30s though, high 30s. And there is our result. Numbers that are not surprising me, with our total being 18, 8, 6, 7. Oh boy, we got better results with the 3950X. I guess it's core sensitive, but you know, it's consistently more than the 5700Gs, showing that as far as Time Spy is concerned, 3950 wins, but by narrow margins. Well, you know, 19.3 versus 18.8. Yeah, it's not the hugest margins. Graphics score 21,541. CPU 11,076, which yes, is more than the 5700G, but less than the 3950. So pretty straightforward results we're getting there, bud. Hitman number 3, I tested it weird last time I did because I had ray tracing turned on and ray tracing sun shadows turned on, but reflections turned off. I accidentally ran it that way for the test that I was doing, thinking, oh, ray tracing was on. If I turn on those reflections, it dumps out the FPS. So I'm just gonna test it the same way. Get the dark and dirty Dartmoor going. Yeah, seeing predictably high frame rates reminiscent of what we had before. Now, I did find that the Hitmans were particularly CPU sensitive, especially at this mild-mannered 1080p resolution settings. So we should see something resembling a difference between this processor and the previous ones. Now, whether or not it's sensitive per core or sensitive per total, well, we're going to find out either way, aren't we, buds? 137.95, bud? Is that what you're saying? I think that's what you're saying. So, dirty Dartmoor. Really? 137.95, which is giving us a significantly higher number. Huh? I knew that this game was CPU sensitive, but holy frick, it really likes that cache. It really likes that cache, bud. Starting off with 400s of frames, 300s of frames, 200s of frames. I never noticed how many frames. Wow. We're really pushing it here. We're staying in the 200s of frames a second running this. This configuration could definitely rip this game at 1440, maybe even 4K. 211.57. Wow. Do I accidentally got my display settings wrong? Like it's still at 1080. Sometimes when you screw with stuff, this thing defaults down to 720. But no, we're still at the 1080s. So, bud. Out of curiosity, even though I haven't logged these results in the last iterations of these tests, I'm gonna turn on the full RT here and see what it spits out. 40s. Okay, so as particular, it doesn't freaking matter. RT cranked on this game, still not quite enough horsepower to run it. Not with my stuff. Not the 6950 XT, even with this CPU. Far Cry 6 was an 80-hour game, and I was happy when it was over because, like, wow, a long game. Starfield, I'm 140 hours into it, and it's just like, more. I want more, please. I don't remember that guy. All right, next up on the Chalkbeam block, we got the Farcry 6 here. You know, good old Far Cry test. They got the built-in benchmarks, and they got some pretty decent-looking graphics. It's always a fun time for these kinds of tests. You know, sometimes it kind of looks like it has RT, even though it doesn't. Just they got some very shiny stuff going on in this engine. Shiny, and they always like their colored smoke. And explosions. Random ones. So Farcry 6 minimum, oh boy, 92. Average, 131. Max, 182. Frames, 8016. Am I doing something wrong here? Did that update? What's going on? I have a hard time believing that CPU cache made that big a frickin' chunky out of it. You know, you do these tests far away from each other, you start questioning your sanity, but like shizzle bud. Okay, so I went into the settings of Cyberpunk because, you know, the elephant in the room was how to unask this situation. It was forcing me to do an update, but I set it to beta 1.63, which I do believe is the version that I ran these previous tests on. Our preset was Ultra with FSR off, film grain, aberration, depth of field, lens flare, and motion blur off, because that's all ass. Everything else, rippin' wicked. Happily. VSync off, 1080p. Runs the benchmark. Now, to be fair, as you can see, we're already getting astronomically high frame rates on this in particular rig to begin with. How much of an improvement are we gonna see? Well, that's the same thing with all these other friggin' games at this setting, right? On this monitor, I always wonder how accurate, if you pay attention to the Cyberpunk benchmarks, you notice the people in the bar are different. There's the same number and they're in the same positions, but they're always randomly generated different. So it's like, how accurate can run-to-run tests be if variables like that are changing? If, you know, one person might have more or less polys than the next. Fans are right ripping. Okay, so on the X3D category, our minimum, very interesting, 53.75. You know, we just can't get that minimum. Just always that one nutter who doesn't want to play along, right? Our average, though, 155.12. The best average so far. Definitely. We're seeing an improvement there. Our max, 275. Oh, that's burn. Frames rendered, number to beat was the 5700G, which was the 5700G. This is okay. So yeah, the 5700G consistently outperformed the 3950X on a technical level. Well, no, maybe not. It's all over the friggin' place. I don't know what I'm talking about. You guys should have figured that out by now. It's your fault for keeping coming back. 9968. So this CPU's trouncing. I'm surprised how wide a margins we're seeing in this application. I guess it's true what they say. This is the best AMD gaming processor, at least since the 7000s. I'm imagining they're going to outperform this. Do I have data for the 7000s? Yeah, but it's at 1440, so not applicable in the quarter lull. All right, so we got the data that we need. We're going to put the update in and see what that does. Get the newest update. 23 gigs. She's a chunky update, bud. Oh. Okay, so because these processors always idle in the 50s, we put ourselves into a situation where up until it gets to 60C, we're keeping her down flat. And then because we don't have a lot of range of adjustment here, basically we shoot up to target 1200 RPM by the time we get to 70. So like in that range, we're gonna have a lot of movement. And then of course it shouldn't go higher than 80. It doesn't seem to detect max temps on this. But I'm pretty sure the BIOS or whatever isn't going to let it go too hot. So PBO should be doing its job, which sometimes like the high 70s. And then for my stink fans here, which are running even if they shouldn't be, that's probably ramp up, ramp down. Yeah, every time this guy pips into the 60s, these puppers turn on. I need to do some tests to determine if I can run these off this, you know, like the motherboard temperatures. What happened to the build that I did for Buddy with the 5700G is that had a temp sensor called the PCH that would stay in the low 50s idle, but then go to the high 50s under load when you were gaming. So I calibrated his coolant fans there based on the PCH with like all the range of movement within that 10-degree range. Yeah, that's our problem right here. This spare drive that the game's installed on, it's just freaking borked. 30 megabytes a second in both directions to try to apply and install this patch. Like, that's obnoxious. It's obnoxious. Freaking bud. You don't even know. Are you finally freaking done, bud? Oh. Finally, after 1,000 years, we have found ourselves the caramel cigarette. All right, it doth appear to have kept the same settings, so let's see what's gonna happen. CPU's freaking ripping. High 70s already. Just giving her, bud. No chill whatsoever, these AMDs sometimes. Okay, here we go. FPS is in the 150s already. These seem consistent with what I was getting before. No, I don't think there's gonna be much change. Like, I had a buddy who was like all freaking out, like, oh, the new update, I'm getting like wicked high frame rates now. It's just like boosted through the ass. And I'm thinking to myself, wow, are they able to improve the game that much? Like, I don't know that they actually could. Like, it still takes power to make this kind of horsepower, this kind of thing happen. Maybe what's happening, he has an AMD card. Maybe they kicked on some FSR on the background on him and he didn't notice. Wow, these are some interesting results, bud. Interesting results indeed. So we saw, okay, we'll start with our averages, 154.44. So that's frig all, that's margin of error. Here we got 1261.83. So that's frig all, that's margin of error. Like, you can see a noted difference between these guys and these guys. So that's margin of error. 9923 are the frames rendered, but the real, this is where it gets interesting. The minimum, 114.36. So our averages and our highs and our frames rendered haven't changed, but our minimum, that's interesting because this happens when certain stuff goes down and causes stutter. It like artificially drops your averages. It looks like they've eliminated that, and I'm going to maintain like above 100 FPS. This game is based on that going to probably feel like it's running better. Question now is if we herp-a-derp some RT here. I'm just going to go to medium ray traced lighting. Derpy derp, herpy derp. 46, 45. Yeah, looks like ray trace is going to be the same as it was before. What do we got here? We got 3503. We got 4897, I think. This is 5654. And 31, I think that's a 9 or it could be a 4. with a 5. We'll say 9.5. Doesn't matter. So yeah, obviously with the CPU, our RT is just a little bit better, but still. Meh. So what happens if we bust out some Fidelity FX? Okay, we'll set it to auto. And I don't know what this means, but apparently higher's better, I think. Oh, it accidentally jumped to 85. Okay, just give her and show me that we could do some 60 FPSs here. Oh, 73, 72. Would we consider terribly playing this game FSR Auto? Maybe it's not so bad on this screen. I did notice a difference in quality between FSR and non-FSR on my Vega 64 before when I was trying to get it to push 1440 double ultra-wide, 5120 by 1440. You know, there was always a little bit of fuzz. Maybe I'm seeing a little bit of fuzz. But it's kind of nice having those reflections. It's like, just adds a little bit of sex appeal to the game. Like, I got to admit, RT's got something going for it. Freaking Nvidia try to sell it as the way of the future, and maybe it is. Then they're also trying to sell DLSS as the way of the future, and maybe that is too. Back in my day, we did DLSS by just setting down the resolution of the game. But on CRTs, you could do that. LCDs, you kind of have to match the native, or else it just looks all wonked out. So FSR low was 57.77, and then FSR, 77.34. They did that. That's a lot of 77s. They did that on purpose. I think you know it. 99.26 was our high. So we still bobble face down below the 50s. 49.68. Okay, well, that was proper our freaking graphics benchmarks telling us the things that we need to know. Yeah, this processor is, I'm going to say, quite a bit. What's Cinebench have to say, though? 2167. 2167. So multi-thread, not a huge improvement over the 5700G, but of course we're going to see bigger numbers from a 16-core processor, right? We'll run the silly GPU test too for good measure, even though nobody cares. Okay, well, this test is telling us 239.08 feet per second. Wow, that's actually a notable difference. Okay, so we got some Cinebench R20 5053. Is that what you're saying? 5053, which is ranked down from the 5700G. It's like it made no difference whatsoever. And of course, it's going to be less than the 3950, as is the tradition. And as much as it pains me to do this because it takes so freaking long to run this test, 10 minutes, 20 minutes if we do them both, I want to know at least the single core. So we're going to rip on some Cinebench R23. The hell do you think you're doing blanking out? You finished the test? Well, you just run for 10 minutes regardless? Listen, I passed your little test. Just release the results. You're just going to keep going to the very last second, aren't you, bud? Just going to keep trying. Just keep giving her. Wait, what's going on here? The timer's up. You can stop now. Oh, you got to finish rendering that last square? What? Why are you still going? What the frick, bud? You're going to do 2 iterations? You suck. Well, at least the CPU's just sipping power. It's just 30 watts. This is the reason why I don't like messing around with R23. You're going to troll me, even though you already did all the squares. You're going to do a whole freaking second pass, bud. Well, you know what? I'm not going to run your multi-core test because I ain't got time for this. You're an asshole. Seriously. Oh. Finally. That was obnoxious. And what's it say our result is? It says 1448. So yes. We did score a win over the 5700G, and obviously it's going to be better than 3000, but not amazingly so. Well, it's hard to say. Like, we're definitely seeing some promising gains in some of these games here. Like, I don't know if something else changed between this and that, but bud, I'm gonna tell you, some of this does look pretty good. Not much of a sample size. One computer, couple games. But yeah, that's the 5800X3D. I officially have a maxed out AM4 gaming rig. Theoretically. Well, it's a 6000 series AMD card, but 6950 XT, 32 gigs of 3600 flat 16, and a 5800 X3D. I had a gut instinct that told me to get a 5900X because I think Starfield might like cores. But whatever, this should be fine till I can find someone to flip it to. Oh, who knows? Stay tuned to find out. Oh, I used up all the battery here. Used up all the friggin' batteries, bud. We're gonna be charging everything today.